$1 million from a forgotten box. I never thought that my father's old dusty attic would be the beginning of a story that would change my life. In Texas, where the sun burns so hot that it seems to scorch your thoughts as well as the earth, I grew up surrounded by the smell of gasoline, cheap coffee, and endless conversations about the importance of having a stable job. My father was a mechanic, my mother worked in a small shop. We weren't poor, but we didn't have many opportunities either. And then one day, while helping my father sort through old boxes in the attic, I came across what at first glance looked like a pile of junk. A cardboard box, yellowed with age, inside, several vinyl records, crumpled covers, scratched discs. My father waved his hand. "Throw it away, nobody needs it." But for some reason, I didn't listen. I've always had a strange trait. When I saw something old, I became curious. What if there was hidden value in it? In the evening, I took out one record, wiped it with an old t-shirt, and put it on the record player, which had been gathering dust on the shelf since my university days. And Elvis's voice filled the room. It was magical. It was as if history itself was touching my home through the hissing and scratches. At that moment, something clicked inside me. I felt that I was holding not just a piece of plastic, but a piece of time. The next day, out of curiosity, I put one record up on eBay. It was an original 1964 Beatles release. To be honest, I had no idea how much it might be worth. I set the starting price at $20 and went to work. In the evening, I almost fell off my chair. The price had risen to $240, and the bidding was still going. I was overcome by a strange feeling, a mixture of joy, excitement, and fear. What if there were dozens of such treasures in this box? I spent the whole night browsing collectors' forums, reading about the value of first editions, rare covers, and printing errors that made a record valuable. In a world I had never even noticed before, there was a whole army of fans willing to pay crazy money for a piece of vinyl history. And then I had an idea. Why not turn this into a business? I started small. On Saturdays, I went to garage sales looking for old collections. I bought a box of records for $5 from an elderly man who said they were just old junk. Inside was a rare Miles Davis jazz record, which I sold for $180. I felt like a treasure hunter. Every time I found another one, my heart pounded like a gambler pulling out a winning ticket. Over time, I began to realize that this was more than just a casual side job. I learned how to photograph the covers so that they looked attractive, wrote detailed descriptions, and added little stories about the performers. This captivated buyers. They weren't just buying a disc, but a little piece of the past, packaged in my words. Translated with deepl.com, free version. But the real turning point came when I met Tom. He owned a small music store in Austin. I walked in there by chance, carrying a few records under my arm to have them checked. Tom looked at them, assessed their quality, and said, "You know, you have a collector's eye. You see what others miss." He explained to me how to distinguish genuine rare records from fakes, how to evaluate the condition of vinyl, and even introduced me to a community of serious collectors. That's when I realized I had to go beyond eBay. I created a simple website, called it Vinyl Treasure, and started posting the records I found there. The site was primitive, but it had one advantage. I added personal stories to each record. For example, "This Doors album has been sitting in the attic for 40 years and still sounds like Jim Morrison is alive." People liked not only the items, but also the feelings I sold along with them. At the time, I was still working as a waiter at a local diner. The shifts were long, and the pay was low. And every evening, when I got home, I would dive headfirst into my website, forums, and auctions. It became my second life. And then it became my main life. One evening, I put up a collection of 10 jazz records from the 1950s for $500. I thought it was an inflated price. But within 24 hours, they sold for $3,200. I sat and stared at the screen, unable to believe my eyes. It was my first real victory. Only one thought echoed in my head. What if this is just the beginning? After that first big sale, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were racing. If one record brought me more than a week's work in the warehouse, what would happen if I found more? It no longer seemed like a coincidence, but like a door that had opened to a whole new world. I started going to garage sales, flea markets, even dumpsters near old houses. People threw away records without realizing that there could be real treasures among them. It seemed that I had learned to see what others did not notice. A slightly damaged cover, an inscription on the envelope, the year of release, every little detail could change the price tenfold. I found an ally, the owner of a small music store on the outskirts of town. He taught me to distinguish between first pressings and reissues, showed me catalogs, and told me about rare recordings that collectors search for years. We sat for hours in his little shop amid the smell of dust and old cardboard, flipping through record after record. Over time, my garage turned into a warehouse. I was no longer just selling records, I was building history. Every item I listed in my online store was accompanied by a short story, where I found the record, what music was on it, what it meant for its time. People were buying not only vinyl, but also a piece of the atmosphere. Gradually, I began to receive orders from abroad. I never thought that my finds would travel to Japan, Germany, or Canada. But the records traveled the world, and the money came back to me. In the first month, I earned more than I had in 6 months working as a loader. The second month, twice as much. I realized it was time to take a risk. I quit my job. It was scary, but it seemed that there was nothing behind me and an unknown sea of opportunities ahead. I invested my first serious money in advertising. I launched a website called Vinyl Treasure. I ordered a simple but stylish design with a black background and a gold logo. I wanted everyone who visited the site to feel like they had stumbled upon a treasure trove of music. But with growth came problems. Competitors began to take notice of my rapid success. One store even tried to lure away my regular customers by offering them discounts. Another accused me of selling fakes. That's when I realized that this business is not just about romance and treasure hunting. It's also about fighting for trust. I decided to give buyers something that no one else could give them: absolute transparency. I shot short videos showing each record, spinning on the turntable, playing the first few seconds. I added certificates of authenticity and sent the most valuable records in special boxes. It took time, but customers kept coming back. And then something happened that changed everything. A Japanese collector contacted me directly. He was looking for a specific release that was not listed in any catalog. And I remembered, a few months ago, I saw a similar copy in the possession of an old jazz musician who was playing on the street near a bar. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now I went back to him. The old man kept the record as part of his life. He didn't want to sell it. We sat on a bench for hours, drinking cheap coffee and talking about music. I listened to his stories about how he played in New Orleans and dreamed of recording his own album. Only when he felt that I truly appreciated his past did he give me that record, saying, "You know what to do with it." I did. I sold it to a Japanese man for more than all my previous earnings combined. It wasn't just a deal, it was a sign that I had reached a whole new level. But that was only the beginning. I had no idea that one day my name would appear in newspapers alongside headlines about art and big money. It all started with that chance discovery in the attic and ended with me trading with the world's most discerning collectors. When sales through my online store became stable, I began to pay more and more attention to rare records that were almost never available for sale. One day, I came across a limited edition copy of Velvet Underground and Nico signed by Lou Reed. I felt that this item was something special. And I was right. It was sold at auction in New York for $45,000. That's when I realized that I was no longer just a seller. I had become a hunter of cultural treasures. I began to be invited as an expert to specialized exhibitions. People came not only to buy records, but also to hear the stories I told about each copy. I learned to find not just objects, but stories woven into the music. And it was these stories that made the items priceless. Eventually, real auction battles appeared in my life. Collectors competed for my lots as if they were rare paintings rather than vinyl records. Once, a Japanese businessman paid $120,000 for a Beatles record that once belonged to George Harrison himself. That was when I first felt that my business had gone beyond simple commerce. I had become part of the global history of music. Fame came naturally. The newspapers wrote, "The guy from Texas who turned dust from the attic into millions." I gave interviews to magazines and even appeared in a documentary about collecting. But what gave me the most pleasure was meeting people who kept their first record, bought from me, as their most precious treasure. Now, looking back, I can say one simple thing: success did not come because I was chasing money. I was always chasing value, the meaning that each thing carries with it. And when I learned to see that value and share it with others, the money found me.